past, present, and future, and this discussion. A very, very happy Teachers' Day. A big thanks to all of you who had shaped us and brought us all to this level. Thank you so very much. And we consciously decided to have this program today on this very special occasion. Before I request Mr. Srivatsram, President Madras Chamber, to give the welcome note, I would just like to make one or two small administrative announcements. Request all the participants to be on mute, both your audio and video to be on mute for the whole event. And please use the Q&A box to raise your questions, not the chat box, but the Q&A box, so that all the questions will be at one place. It's easy to handle. And also, many of the people from academia wanted a certificate. So the chamber will give an e-certificate at the end after you send the feedback form. Thank you so very much. I'll stop here and request Mr. Srivatsram, MD Wheels India, the President of the Madras Chamber, to give the welcome note.
Thank you, Saraswati, and good morning to everyone for this webinar on NEP 2020 Learn, Unlearn, and Relearn. It gives me immense pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our panel, Mr. Ramkumar Ramurthy, our past president, Dr. Srinivasan, Mr. Selvam, Dr. Ajit Jain, Mr. Kanyapan, and Kishore, and participants from various colleges and member industries. Of course, a lot of you will know about the chamber, but let me just inform the others. We were established in 1836 and we are in our 184th year of service to industry and trade. In terms of this particular area of education, on our 175th anniversary, we started a vocational skill development center working along with our partner PAN IIT for training unskilled youth and upskilling semi-skilled workforce in Tamil Nadu. In addition to that, we have also been having a number of programs, food for thought programs on right to education, employment against employability, and whether India will pass the global test. In recent times, with Mr. Ramkumar's involvement, we have also played a significant role in assisting the University of Madras and other institutions to revising their syllabus with a few courses where we have expertise. The Chamber has signed MOUs with member institutions to conduct courses that add values in areas related to EXIM, company law, taxation, entrepreneurship, development, etc. The Chamber is organized around a number of expert committees, and our expert committee on education has been very active over the last year. We played a major role in conducting programs to benefit faculties in 30 plus member institutions. Even during the pandemic, we've tried to have workshops on stress management and on the challenges and opportunities for the academic institutions post-COVID. The discussion on the NEP 2020 is one such initiative which will have far-reaching impact not only on the students and academia, but also on society and economy at large. Coming to the National Education Policy 2020, this is a major revision on the previous policy, the first time in more than a decade, which has tried to address some of the existing challenges of our education system and build a new foundation for students. The idea is to bring about more multidisciplinary approach and bring the sciences and the arts together in a way so that it improves the flexibility and adaptability for students in terms of choosing subjects in the undergraduate and the postgraduate courses. Now, this is actually a challenge that industry also faces because one of the only things that we know for sure is that uncertainty is here to continue. And with uncertainty, the nature of industries is going to change. The nature of roles that individuals have in organizations is going to change. We find even in our own automotive industry, people are having to learn new skills because the skills that they had acquired and entered the company in are no longer in as much demand as the newer skills which are coming in. So this continuous learning is something that organizations look for. And if we get the educational institutions to bring about that change in terms of the input that comes into industry, which is more flexible and more adaptable to changing circumstances, it will hold our industry and our economy in good stead. Uh, with that, I think while we are waiting, while a policy has been announced, implementation is the most important part of it. And we'll have to wait and see how the implementation proceeds to really understand how it's going to change us. But it is a policy for the next few decades going forward, which should hold our country in good stead. In this webinar, we wait to understand from our experts on the panel about the different dimensions of NEP 2020. We've also consciously chosen Teachers' Day to have this discussion as a salute to all teaching professionals who are participating in this event and our panelists. I welcome all of you again to this discussion and look forward to our interactions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Srivats. As he said, the Industry Institute Connect chamber what we need to do to bridge the gap. This program is unlearned, but we are trying to look at from the new national education policy. Thank you so much. I now request Mr. R.M. Kishore, the chairman of our Education and Skill Expert Committee and vice chairman RMK Group of Institutions, to tell us briefly about the overview of this program and the purpose of it. Mr. Kishore.
Thank you, madam. A very pleasant morning to the president and the past president of MCC, the panelists, and all the members who have attending the discussion on national education policy, learn, unlearn, and relearn. At the outset, let me wish all the teachers a very happy Teachers' Day today. In Tamil, there is a saying which says Mada, Pida, Guru, and Devam. The first two teachers for anybody is the mother and the father who's been who teaches us the basic things, and the next guru is the teachers, where we spend most of our times and most of our days with them. They are who shapes us and makes us what we are today. So with this salute, and we have taken the discussion on national education policy today on a Teachers' Day, so that we will be able to know. We have been talking about changing the education policy for the past 3 decades, almost 34 years now. The easy thing that we go back and say that the education system is not perfect enough to shape the students. The students are not competitive enough in the global market. And the government has come up with an policy, the new education policy here. And we have our panelists who's been waiting to discuss about. I would like to thank Mr. Ramkumar sir, Mr. Selvam sir, Mr. Ajit sir, Mr. Srinivasan sir, Mr. Kanyappan sir for accepting our invitation on behalf of the Madras Chamber of Commerce, and who are waiting here to share their views. So without further ado, I would as eager as you to wait and listen to their discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kishore. And we will now move on to the panel discussion. Consciously invited the speakers to bring different perspective to the table. So we have 4 excellent speakers and a very excellent moderator who you all know and whose passion to education is also well known. Without further ado, I will request Mr. Ram Kumar to take over the proceedings now.
Yeah, thank you, Saraswati, Srivats and Kishore. Let me take this opportunity to welcome each one of you to the session. And let me also extend my gratitude to all the teachers on Teachers' Day. Kishore and Ramanathan, the chair and the vice chair of the Education Committee, were very keen that we have the discussion on the National Educational Policy of 2020, and here we are. I think this is a very important topic. It's unfortunate that many of the electronic channels in the country, they are preoccupied with other topics. I was hoping that this topic would be the prime time discussion on many of the channels and newspapers. But in the absence of they doing it, I think it's imperative that chambers of commerce play a much larger role in trying to unravel what the policy can do to the hundreds of millions of students and learners across the entire ecosystem. I think it's even more important that we are discussing this topic today because the quality of education, how equitable it is, how easily accessible is education to everybody in the country, and how inclusive it is, are topics that have been discussed for the last several decades. And we are at a juncture where a little over 90 million Indians are going to enter the workforce between 2020 and 2030. And almost a similar number, if not a higher number, is also going to enter higher education over the next 10 to 15 years. Given that the national education policy, in a very comprehensive fashion, was reframed about 34 years back, I think it is high time that the policy was made available. And as Srivat said, we're all looking forward to the implementation dynamics of this particular policy. And as all of you would know, much has changed in 34 years. Ever since the previous edition or the version of the policy was launched, even fundamental beliefs around who the teacher is and who the taught is. Should teaching happen in physical spaces or can teaching happen in digital and virtual spaces? Is the degree relevant in today's context as well, in the context of certificate programs, nano degrees, MOOC, online courses? And I'm sure that all of us have been exposed to some of the newer models of teaching and learning. And we've all come across a number of jargons from flipped classroom to whatnot. So I think in the last 34, 35 years, a number of beliefs that all of us held about education and learning have undergone a significant change. And in the context of the use of technology, globalization, newer disciplines of study emerging with every passing day, I think this particular topic on the policy is exceptionally important and relevant. And as Srivat said, we have a terrific panel. We couldn't have asked for anything more. In fact, when Kishore, Ramanathan, Saraswati and I, we were discussing, we were saying, hey, some of us have listened to many such panels in the last 1 month, ever since the launch of the draft version of the policy. And we realized that many of the panels actually had policymakers and people from the governing bodies of educational institutions coming and then providing their inputs, which is important. But the one thing that we collectively discussed and decided upon is we actually need practitioners. People who have lived and breathed education over the last several decades and have seen various structural changes play out before their eyes. And they were part of those changes that were effected in the marketplace. So in that context, I think we are very fortunate to have people who have built institutions, people who have actually played the role of teachers, principals, correspondents of educational institutions for over 20, 30 years and have been extremely hands-on. And this is not going to be an armchair exercise. They are going to probably share their own personal experience that they have gathered over the period. Yeah, the only disappointment for me is we tried hard to get a lady on the panel. We tried, but unfortunately, some of the people that we invited, they were not available today. So we said the best thing to do is to probably get Saraswati, the General Secretary, to kick off today's event. And who better than Saraswati herself, the goddess of knowledge, music, art, speech, learning, and wisdom to kick off this session on Teachers' Day. I think Stevens explained the concept and the title or the topic of learn, unlearn, and relearn. I think Kishore was the one who alluded to the fact that, hey, look, there is a lot of criticism about our existing educational setup, and I agree to it. But I would probably suggest let us not beat ourselves up on what we have not done over the last 20, 30 years, because there is so much that we have done in education. Even in the last 34 years, what if a policy has not come about? I think individuals, organizations, collectively as a society, we made changes to the educational apparatus and produced some of the best minds in the marketplace. Coming from the technology industry, I cannot but give you the example of Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadala, Arvind Krishna. These are all products of our educational system. And if you were to probably look at just the two of them, Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadala, today they run corporations whose market capitalization is India's GDP or something very similar to that. Fine. And if you were to throw in Arvind Krishna, who studied in one of the schools in Tamil Nadu, in the State School in Kunnur, I think the educational system has produced some exceptional minds. And all of us need to be collectively thankful for what the educational system has done to us as individuals and to India at large. So I wouldn't probably go down the path of being very skeptical and criticizing the educational landscape. I think we have done well. There is a lot that we can potentially do to take education to the next level, given the changes, both structural and cultural, that are happening in the marketplace. I know many people have spoken about, hey, what is the criticism about the educational system? Are they leading to the right jobs? Are they relevant? Are they too rote learning driven? Are they too exam centric? Can we calibrate learning effectiveness and teacher effectiveness, so on and so forth? I think we can go on and on. But I think the reason that we are here today is largely to try and then unravel the contours of the new education policy, what it means to us, and how can we take it forward. With those opening remarks, let me quickly take maybe about 2-3 minutes to introduce the panelists. I'm sure that none of them needs the kind of elaborate introduction that we would have otherwise provided. Let me start with Dr. Ajit Prasad Jain. Thank you, sir, for joining in. I know that you had some difficulty with the WebEx platform. All of us have. So I think we just need to get used to the newer versions of technology in the marketplace, because if we have to drive equity at scale in the area of education, we need to embrace technology and not probably stay away from it. I think Dr. Jain brings a very interesting dimension to the entire panel discussion. Many of us know him as the former senior principal of one of the best run schools in India, not just in the state of Tamil Nadu, Bhavan's Rajaji Vidyashram. What is fascinating about his profile when I went through it is he actually had his schooling in Dindivanam. So clearly he knows the landscape of what it is to be in a metropolis while being educated in the hinterland. He has been on the governing body of the Central Board of School Education for many, many years, and therefore has had a ringside view of policy making. And equally important, I don't want to go into the announcement that was made yesterday of people who are going to discuss a new education policy from the state of Tamil Nadu. About 7 former and current vice chancellors have been put together to form this panel. But the interesting part of Dr. Jain's profile is also the fact that he has been on the Academic Council, Senate, and the Syndicate of the University of Madras. So he understands what students from schools get to do and to shape the higher education landscape. And the final point that I would touch upon is he actually is a recipient of the National Best Teachers Award from the former President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam. Welcome, sir. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Second is Dr. Srinivasan. I have had an opportunity to interact with him on one or two occasions earlier, not sure whether he remembers it, when I was very closely associated with the University of Madras. A very senior professor and head of the Department of Statistics, spent a little over 33 years, very similar to Dr. Jain, who spent about 32 years in the academia and continues to support the academia in a variety of ways. He has seen multiple generations of educational policy. He has been on various boards of the University Graduate Commission, various committees. As part of the Tamil Nadu Account Statistic Committee, he is an elected member on the Indian Statistical Institute of the Netherlands, and he's also played a variety of roles as an academic administrator, having done the role of a dean, director, traveled extensively to North America, to both US and Canada, many parts of Europe, Africa, so on and so forth. And someone who has actually guided dozens of students on research for their PhD program. But what is very fascinating, just as I spoke about Dr. Ajit's recognition as the best teacher, I picked up something very interesting from the LinkedIn profile of Mr. Srinivasan. He said if he were to be born again, he would once again join statistics to explore the beauty of statistics, something that he's not able to do it in this generation. Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.
Let me quickly move to Selvam. I've had a very long association of working very closely with several leaders at VIT, an institution that has been around for, once again, for 32 years. I don't know, this number 32 and 33 seems to be the common pattern or thread across all the panelists today. As many of you know, VIT University has consistently been ranked as the top private engineering institution in India for 4 or 5 years in a row, and is also one of the institutions of eminence or excellence in the country. Selvam is very passionate about several aspects of education and academia. In fact, while they are known for engineering education quite broadly, it's important to know that Selvam was also the one who was largely responsible, the architect of introducing courses on law, hotel management, agriculture, and many other disciplines as part of the VIT canvas. Selvam is one of the youngest pro-chancellors of a university across the world. And what is fascinating is VIT recently, I think it's probably just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, was identified as one of the top institutions for innovation in India. And Selvam was the one who actually championed it. So any questions on innovation, I think Selvam would be the right person to answer those questions. Thanks a lot, Selvam. Thanks for coming in. And finally, a good friend and a member of the General Committee of the MadrasChamber of Commerce, Mr. Kaniyappan, who is the Managing Director of WAPCO India Limited. Mr. Kaniyappan has had a long history of associating himself with the manufacturing ecosystem in India. As many of you know, the manufacturing industry is the largest employer of talent that comes out of educational institutions in the country. And he has had long association with the TVS Group. And more recently, he has been the architect of growth of WAPCO in India. What I found very interesting in Mr. Kaniyappan's profile is he did his graduation from NIT in Surathkal, which was then REC, but then he has got fantastic exposure to education across the world. He has a master's in manufacturing systems from Warwick in UK. He then did an executive MBA from Great Lakes. Then he went on for an advanced management program at the Wharton Business School at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. So someone who never stopped learning, even formally. So, and he's recently rated amongst the top 100 CEOs in India by Business Today, the best-selling business magazine in the country. So with those quick introductions. Let me just say one word and then maybe turn it over to the panelists. As many of you know, this document that was published is more a vision document. It is more an aspirational document. It's not that everything that is contained in it is going to be readily implemented. It probably provides a sense of direction, certain guardrails as to how education should be looked at for it to be meaningful for different stakeholders. Obviously, the key stakeholders being the student and the teachers and the entire ecosystem that's built around it. I was very impressed when I actually read the document. I had an opportunity to read it twice, thrice, that they truly believe in making change both to the structure and to the culture of education. To the structure of education in many different ways. Let me highlight 2 or 3 of those. This new model of 5+3+3+4, I think it's remarkable. To think about a degree program more in the context of a 4-year degree program, but clearly look at it as an option that is given to the student to get a certificate at the end of the first year, a diploma at the end of the second year, a degree at the end of the third year, and try and then build research as part of the undergraduate program. And finally, in terms of the nodal body, to ensure that you probably have a single throat to choke, if you will. Currently, I'm sure that many of you who have run courses, you realize that you sometimes need to go to the Medical Council of India and to the AICTE for affiliation. You have to go to AICTE and UGC for affiliation of the same course, so on and so forth. So the thinking structurally to probably have one body, one commission, which takes care of every aspect, whether it's accreditation, whether it's funding, whether it's standards, whether it's assessment and testing, so on and so forth. I think they've done a lot on the cultural side. I think this is a fascinating element of the education policy. I think Srivat's mentioned this at the beginning to talk about shift from a very siloed education to a flexible, multidisciplinary education where you can give the choice to the individual so that they can cut across arts, science, commerce, engineering, technology, so on and so forth. Second is a significant focus on preschool. Maybe I'll come to Dr. Jain in a minute on this, where there's going to be greater focus on numeracy as well as on literacy. The flexibility to exit and enter any program at the higher education level and to create a credit bank that people could dip into. The amalgamation of vocational education into formal education. Maybe this might be a question for Kaniyappan at some stage, given that we seem to have over-indexed on degrees and postgraduate program, and in some sense under-indexed on vocationalization and skills. More autonomy to institutions. Selvam might remember Dr. Vishwanathan, the Chancellor of VIT University. I think for a decade he has been talking about the abolition of the affiliating system of education, which in some respect could be for flexibility and autonomy that has to be granted. I often tell in the MadrasChamber events that the industry has moved to Industry 4.0, but the educational system is still an equivalent of Industry 2.0, where you want to mass produce people, create a formal template that is defined by a central university, and then create talent at scale with the same chapa, with the same block, so on and so forth. And the good thing is, I think the education system has also recognized that a single point of defining moment is not good. You take one examination and that cannot define the career trajectory of an individual. They have at least given the option of 2 examinations, where in some respects there is an option for you to re-engage with the assessment framework and do a reasonably good job. So I think with those opening comments, let me tell you that we are not going to probably talk about things that the policy makers always keep talking about as a challenge. We will leave it to the policy makers. We will get to the brass tacks. So we're not going to talk about whether 3.2% of GDP can be taken to 6% of GDP and how are we going to fund it. We will not boil the ocean. We will not keep talking about how it's all a state subject. Education is in the concurrent list. How are we going to probably marry the central government and the state government and bring about greater alignment? Where is funding going to come? So on and so forth. I think these are discussions that we can have offline, and we will probably get into some of the practical elements. What I would do is, we will take this in three parts. First part is, we would request the panelists to identify one topic based on their experience where they think that the new education policy has done a remarkable job, and one topic that they think hasn't done a good job. Maybe take about 5 minutes to walk us through that. Then spend more time on Q&A with the panelists. I have a few questions. I will ask them if there are no questions coming in from the Q&A or the chat room. If not, immediately after this, we will straight away go into the Q&A. And we will start with Dr. Jain, then go to Dr. Srinivasan, then to Selvam, and then to Kaniyappan. With those opening remarks, over to you, Dr. Jain. One topic you think they've done a good job, one area where you think there is a lot needs to be done, which has not been covered by the new education policy. Dr. Jain. Dr. Jain, you're on mute. You may have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me start with one interesting note what I have seen in the NEP 2020. All these years, the preschooling, the so-called pre-KG, LKG and UKG, it was never bothered by the state government, either by the state government nor by the central government. And there is no one to control. And as a matter of fact, when I was the principal of Bhavan School, before 2009, before the introduction of RTE, when we used to have interview for the LKG children, we used to get letters from the parents stating that my child has got an awful examination, because we used to conduct the interviews during the month of December. So they used to give a letter stating that my child has got an awful examination in the preschool, so give us some other time or some other date. So when we are telling there is no writing to be there, it should start only in the second term of UKG. But whereas the so-called preschools, they have quarterly exam, half-year exam, annual examination for the 2.5-year-old or 3-year-old kid. There is no one to control, and the mushroom of franchisees like Gangur Kids, Kidsy, etc., etc. I don't want to name. So now this policy has brought that pre-KG, LKG, and UKG under the umbrella of the state government and under the umbrella of NCRT. That is the most welcoming factor, in my opinion, I could say. And bringing class 1 and 2 also under the early childhood education. Now, as of now, class 1 and 2 are in the primary education. Now, bringing 1 and 2 under early childhood education and setting up a separate board and separate system for early childhood education, which is a welcoming factor. That is my first point of positive in the NEP. And there are a lot of things about the system of the existing boards of education. Now, if you take Tamil Nadu, we have only one board, and Maharashtra one board like that. And we have 2 national boards, one is CBSE and another one is ICSE. Now this NEP 2020 is allowing anybody can start a board. Even in Tamil Nadu, they can have any number of boards, whatever they want. If the state government wanted to have a board for every district, they can have, because they are not going to give the work of affiliation and other things and recognition to these boards. And the boards will be renamed as Board of Assessment. All the boards in the country will be renamed as Boards of Assessment. So their job is only to assess the child and give the result. And the remaining thing, the administrative matter, recognition and affiliation, all that is going to be handled by a different board. So therefore, they are giving chance for private parties also to open a board. I can open a board. Dr. APJ Board of Assessment, and Mr. Kannipan can open a Kannipan Board of Assessment. So therefore, they're giving opening for private sectors also to come into play in the education field. That is another positive point. And if you want me to take the negative point, for everything they set up a board. Now the examination at the end of 3 and 5 and 8, class 3, class 5 and class 8 examination, they're going to have an examination. In my opinion, it is contra to the RTE 2009, because RTE 2009 says no detention up to class 8. And there is no examination, formal examination for RTE children, for anybody. But when you are going to have 3, 5, 8 examination, and they say that also will be conducted by centrally set up a board. So they are going to set up another board of assessment, and nationwide it will conduct examination for class 3, 5, 8. Right? And then the regular boards, they are going to assess the children in class 10 and class 12. So therefore, there is a contradictory of interest, clash of interest between the NEP 2020 and RTE 2009. And other thing is, there are now we have only one board in the state board, and other one is in the central board. But now they are going to form lot of boards, National Testing Agency and the board for conducting examination for 358, and also another board for teacher development. There are going to be more and more boards. So I'm afraid the head of the institution, he will be answerable to each board. This is very, very administratively, the heads of the institutions will be in a crossroad. So this is the negative point of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. I think you brought up a couple of very important aspects. I cannot agree more that the emphasis on early childhood care and education, especially age group of 3 and 8, good that they have actually integrated it as part of the school education. Otherwise, the Anganwadis and the Balwadis, fine, and the profile of teachers that they actually had. The big question that keeps coming up is if you don't impart the right skills at these ages, their ability to follow the curriculum at a later stage becomes a bit of a challenge. And it's also interesting that you brought up that fact that will this lead to more government and less governance intervention with the formation of multiple boards. Yeah, with that, over to Mr. Srinivasan, if you could probably provide your inputs.
I will start by paying my humble pranams to all the teachers on this very important day of Teachers' Day. And I also thank. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody go on mute, please? There is some background noise. Yeah.
And then I want to thank all the office bearers of MCCI for giving me this opportunity. So as you look at it, the policy seems to be a holistic, providing a holistic system of education. But what I have looked into it is I have looked at 4 different aspects on disseminating the whole NEP. The first one is a policy changes in it. I think many of them talked about the policy changes. The second part, which is also important, is admission into higher education institutions. The third part is what are the salient features which have been included as a part of liberal arts and science courses or basic sciences courses. And of course, the last part is going to be what after doing the graduation or post-graduation, that is basically employment avenues. And of course, at the end of it, I will try to put across my concerns based on this new education policy. Now, as you have seen that there's going to be a single overreaching body as far as the higher education system is concerned. So both and public, private institutions are going to have the same set of norms, same set of regulations, accreditation policies, and standards. So that's going to be one important aspect. The important aspect, because Mr. Ramurthy has mentioned that I'm also a researcher too. So you can see that there's going to be a National Research Foundation which is going to be established. to facilitate merit-based equitable education to one and all. The other important aspect which I have seen is teachers training institutes will be standardized, will be strengthened and standardized. I have seen that in my own post-graduation program, students coming from African countries, they have a 4-year program where teaching pedagogy and your graduate programs both are intermingled together. So it's better that you have postgraduate programs, which is a 4-year program, where your graduate programs plus teaching pedagogy, if they go together, I think they will be very good teachers if they go up the ladder and start teaching. So that's one important aspect which I liked in it. So I want you to look into that. The other important aspect is creating an academic bank of credit, because that's very important, because people will always have to go and search where my credits are if I want to transfer, move from one place to another place. So this becomes a very big problem. So academic bank of credit for digitally storing of all the academic credits. So that's going to be one important aspect. Now coming to the second point, as far as the entry is concerned, they said there's going to be a common aptitude test for the students planning to enter the higher education institutions. It is for the institutions now to take up the scores depending upon their requirements. So I would like the institutions to look at those scores which are good enough, because these are aptitude scores. Aptitude is very important for the students to take up courses of higher learning. So this particular one is very important as far as the education policy is concerned. And now the other thing that I have seen, indeed, I think has been pointed out by some of them, there will be no rigid separation between curricular and extracurricular activities, vocational and academic stream. So all of them have been brought into the same thing. We have seen, indeed, as a part of the, as I was a dean for almost 5 years, at the earliest stages, I remember I had interaction with the CII, where we tried to bring in the skill-based courses, learning skill-based courses at the graduate level and the postgraduate level. So now I think the new education policy has put in all of them together, wherein you have no separation between curricular, extracurricular activities, vocational courses, and academic streams. So inclusion of professional and choice-based disciplines as a part of higher education gives students a new dimension towards honoring soft skills. And well-diversified exposure will enable students to take their own choice rather than pushing on the students to take something which is going and growing. So it is going to be to critically think and analyze them as to take what course they want. Now coming to the other point, which I think Mr. Ramurthy and Mr. Srivatsan has already mentioned, that there's going to be a multi and exit. I have one concern here, which I will talk at the end. Multiple entry and exit points by giving certificates, diplomas, bachelor's degree, and 4-year programs. And other point, you can have a 2-year program or a 1-year program at the master's course. That's going to be an important aspect as far as education is concerned. And I like the part which says MPhil will be discontinued. I'm very happy about it. In higher education, college system, affiliation system has been pointed out. I know, and Professor Ramanathan is also there. Both of us know how difficult this affiliation part is. As a Dean of the College Development Council, I face a real Herculean task. Almost for every 6 months in a year, you have to go through this affiliation process of giving affiliation to courses, to the schools, to the colleges, so on and so forth. So I'm sure this particular part of affiliation is going to be made easier so that the colleges need not run to the universities to go in for the affiliation process. And lastly, coming to the part, the employees, I think they would require graduates who are skilled, and I am sure it is going to be, if implemented, that's very important. I have to underline. I think that was also raised up by Ramurthy. It is going, if it is implemented both in letter and spirit by all stakeholders, it will undoubtedly transform the overall education ecosystem in the country and should be able to provide necessary workforce as early as possible, that is the need of the hour. So what I would like to conclude here is, the welcoming feature of the industries as well as the educational group is the focus on technology, seamless learning, holistic, multidisciplinary education from the undergraduate level itself, institutional and academic autonomy, as well as independent national research foundation. This is as regard the dissemination of the NEP. My concern is, as all of you agree, there is a big dearth of faculty available as far as the colleges are concerned. Especially I have seen, probably I was told Mr. Ramurthy is the English faculty. So if you look at the faculty like English, mathematics, there's hardly any number of people who are available to teach. So how is this new education policy going to fill up the gap of getting qualified? Remember, we need not quantity, we need quality teachers also. Both quality and quantity is important. So, and furthermore, if you are going to flex your curriculum, you need more teachers. So flexible curriculum, more teachers, obviously that is the need of the hour. So how are we going to fill up that particular gap? Lastly, there is no roadmap for research. Hardly 1 or 2 points have been mentioned. I think something more needs to be done as far as research is concerned. Exit is very clear as far as the graduation is concerned, first year, second year, third year. But if you talk about relearning, unlike in the Western countries, if a student want to enter at any particular point after a particular time gap, how is he going to enter the system? That particular point is not clear as far as the new education policy is concerned. So these are the few of my concerns as far as the NEP is concerned. Thank
Sure.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan. I think you brought up a very important aspect is, I think teachers are at the core of the entire education learning process. And many of us have spoken about it. I'm sure that several of us have very strong opinion about do we even need to probably provide tenurial security to teachers? Is that the bane of the quality output? Do we need to probably bring about greater accountability? And we see that between private institutions and public institutions in the country. And the fact that we need a pedagogical institute, both for teachers as well as people from the industry to become teachers at various points in time. So a standard body would be really helpful. Selvam, over to you. Selvam, are you on mute?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Let me thank the office bearers of MCCI for inviting me. The new education policy 2020 is here after 33, 4 years. Many committees were formed, Hari Gauthan Committee, T.R. Subramanian Committee. Finally, we got this Kasturirangan Committee. So as I said, it's a, if you want to say in single line, it's a holistic development, multidisciplinary education system. If you want, we can say many important points, advantage of this policy. Let me point out 1 or 2 out of this. Main thing is abolition of affiliating system. I think everyone agree with me. So now they are going to give importance for audit accreditation. Academic audit accreditation going to decide the future of the institutions, like NAC or ABET, US ABET. Next thing is forming of Higher Education Commission of India, the umbrella of architecture, which is going to have independent bodies like standard setting, funding, accreditation, research. So which will abolish AICT and the UGC, running pillar to pillar. As a private institution, Professor Srinivasan also agreed. As a government institution also, we have problems. So we have to run pillar to pillar to get approval every year. In fact, as IOE, still we are going to AICT. So it's not clear. We are very happy with that. Another thing is we have all standalone universities, like agriculture universities, so many universities. It will become multidisciplinary university. Soon they will become multidisciplinary university. Next is, as everyone said, the education system is going to change. It's going to be 4 years. So first year it will be, what do you call it, the exit certificate will be given, second year diploma, third year a degree. I think this will increase the literacy rate of India. Definitely it will. Next is break in course. If there are some financial issue or some family issue, you can take a break and you can join again, have a credit facility. Next important thing is quality of teachers. They're going to form a teacher training board, form a national wise. As I said, many points are there. I don't want to take your time. I mentioned only 2 or 3 points. Maybe if, as an institution, as I said, Mr. Ramkumar mentioned, we're going to have only practical discussions. One is they're talking about the economical and educational viability of the institutions. They say if you have minimum members, it should be matched. If there are 2,000 numbers, 3,000 numbers, matched. As on today, particularly in South India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, almost each taluk has a college. Maybe in each village they have a school. Mr. Kane will agree with you. Each village there's a school. We have 500 engineering colleges. South, particularly in Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka, and Maharashtra, has a maximum colleges in India. As per this new policy, if they want to merge, what will happen? The access to the rural and semi-rural students will be affected. Another thing is, as a management, whatever they invested, what will happen? There's another issue, financial issue is there. If they match with the two colleges, what will happen to them? Main thing is access. So once upon a day, our elders used to say, you should not live in the village, there's no temple. Now people say, you should not live in the village, there's no school. It's happening. But we'll be missing that, particularly the colleges, say engineering college, each village has engineering college. But the government should help them to survive. But the policy says it should be merged. I think that's a minimum, 1 or 2 disadvantage. Thank you.
Thanks, Selvam. I think the two points that you brought up are very essential. One is, rather than look at auditing the college at the beginning and providing affiliation, look at what is the output or the outcome that they are providing and then rank it. That is a much better approach. And I cannot agree more, because I know as an organization, we have worked very closely with several engineering colleges in Tamil Nadu, and you have one nodal university which has 530 engineering colleges affiliated to it. I don't know, where is the time for people to focus on academia when they only go around affiliating colleges? And much to my surprise, I thought Anna University had the challenge. I had an opportunity to join the Senate of Dr. MGR Medical Varsity, and I realized that there are 800 affiliated colleges there. So Anna University and its 530 seem to be a better option to me. Thanks, Selvam, for bringing up those 2 points. Maybe more practical issues will come up during the Q&A. And finally, Mr. Kaniyappan, over to you.
Thank you, Ram, for the opportunity to share my perspective on industry. The education policy is being revised after 34 years. During this 34 years, the industry has come a long way. I have 2-3 slides to just take the participants through. If you permit me, I would like to share. Yeah, next slide, please. No, all of us know in the 80s, of course, I joined the industry in 1982. I have actually gone through the multiple phases with which the industry went through during the last 30-40 years. In the 80s, actually, it's a matter of license, Raj. Everything is controlled by the government. The industry was actually serving only the domestic requirements. A lot of waiting list for anything and everything. Technology, even for manufacturing technology, we had to rely on either Germany or Japan or the developed countries. Product technologies, always you had to go through the joint venture route. It was a completely different environment. But then the liberalization made a big change. Companies in India took a different path, multiple paths. Each depends on the sector on which they are. The auto industry I come from took a path of TQM, total quality management, TPM, lean manufacturing, etc. These approaches were actually adapted to make the companies competitive, as the industry was moving to part of a global supply chain. Here, from the perspective of education or how we develop the talent pool, this ecosystem actually helped the students who are coming out of the campuses with a possibility to train them and develop them to serve the industry. Because if you see TQM had its own pillar of training as one of the key pillars. Many companies had their own training and development functions. TPM had its own framework to help people understand how to put the improvements in the system. Lean manufacturing or a Toyota production system actually guided the people. So even though the industries were not sending out highly employable talent pool, but industry had an ecosystem to help them. Again, fundamentally, the model in India was the culture of continuous improvement and the employee engagement in everything that we do, which essentially helped the companies to achieve what they want to accomplish using the talent pool that was coming out. Also, we use this the 1990s time frame to actually develop our own manufacturing technology. Today, we have come to a stage that we don't have to rely on anybody on manufacturing technology, but still in the area of product development, we still rely on joint ventures, particularly, for example, in the area of BS6 and all that. Still, many of the technologies we have to rely on the global partners. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is again, I have used only the APCO slide to give authenticity to what I'm going to speak. In the 80s, we had to rely on for everything, Europe or Japan. This is a WAPCO corporate slide deck, one of the deck. Today, the WAPCO product development is taken by, it is done by Europeans and Indians together. We are actually more or less playing the equal role in the product development. We don't have to actually feel inferior, or we don't feel that we are taking the technology from Europe. India contributes in a very big way in the area of software development, which is one of the key requirements today's products. India actually is also a center of is considered as a center of excellence for frugal innovations. In these areas, of course, we contribute significantly. Of course, Europe still is the, I would say they still set standards in some of the very advanced areas. But we have come a long way. We can really feel proud that the kind of talent pool that we have created in India, they have come to a stage that actually they can drive a most advanced global development sitting in India or Chennai, being a part of a global development network. Next, please. Yeah, this is in the historical model. But then, last 3-4 years now, the focus is on digital transformation. While, in the 90s, Tom Friedman wrote a book that world is flat. He has to say that world is flat because before that, India was considered as inferior in terms of whatever we can contribute, or he has to prove that India and China actually they are reaching a level that they can compete with global. But today, in the area of digital, I believe India has actually advantage, not even equal, because we have a large pool of talent that's coming out of the campuses with the digitally enabled capabilities, high aspirations, large number. These youngsters in WAPCO, for example, they are driving all the new developments in this company. Very young, 3-4 years into the company, much more knowledgeable than the people who are there in the system. So today, the focus is the old people. They need to, as a theme of today's discussion, they have to unlearn many of what they have. They have to learn new techniques. I have actually put 24 of my executives who come from the maybe more than 10 years experience. Now we're putting into one of the TVS schools to learn coding and embedded systems, even though that is not the subject they are familiar with. These youngsters who have come with these skill sets now, most sought after as we drive the digital transformation in the company. So I am actually, I believe the positive side of India is these youngsters, and we may blame, we may do anything, but I'm sure they are the hope for the future. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, one of the steps that we need to do is essentially to further strengthening our partnership, industry and academia, because going forward, industry itself cannot handle the challenges of technologies, challenges of the future of the factory, etc. themselves. They need to really partner with institutions and work. Actually, that is happening, but I don't think it is happening to the way it is required. Now, at this stage, I would like to answer the questions that you asked, Ram. One is, what is the positive side of the new education policy. New educational policy actually factors all the new skills that are required. As I have said here, the 21st century skills, most of them actually it is recognized, and I understand it is going to be a part of that. Particularly teaching coding at the level of 6 years itself, and making sure the curriculum is largely addressing the vocational needs, also focusing more on the critical thinking, creativity, which will actually elevate the country, elevate India to a level that we will be able to develop products in India, not develop somewhere else, be a part of that. But in India, we will develop and we will build a lot of patents. I'm sure many PhDs will come, many companies will employ PhDs. So this is the positive side of the NEP 20. The improvement side, I believe that we need to make internship mandatory, because if the partnership between the industry and institution have to happen, we at least for 6 months, these students, maybe final year students, that level, they need to actually have the opportunity to work in industries more on a mandatory manner. We have to pay them some stipend. The way the medical education is happening, I think we need to see if that can be put in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kanyapan. I cannot agree more. Fine, when you said that how you started with the talent that was made available in India, and how you've actually transformed the organization to take on next generation activities, and you're today co-innovating with the entire WAPCO ecosystem across the world in developing newer products. In fact, in the tech industry, we keep talking about how many of the large companies came to India for cost, stayed on for quality, and are growing for innovation. And because today, GE, Jack Welch Center, or if you probably look around and talk to World Bank, Barclays, PayPal, many of the organizations here in Chennai, they will not tell you that the next generation products are being developed from India for the world. And it's no longer just India maintaining and managing stuff that has been developed across the world. So with those opening comments, I do have a few questions, but then in the interest of time, what I would do is maybe take up some of the questions that have come already on the Q&A chart. I think Ranga has been quite prolific with his questions. So let's probably first take a couple of questions from Ranganathan. The first one is, do we need to regulate education so tightly in the country? Fine, when today you can get an online certificate or a degree from any part of the world, which is recognized by the industry. Fine, and I think this topic became extremely relevant about 2 weeks back when Google announced that they are going to get into education in a big way. And tomorrow, if Google were to offer certificates and capsule programs in 6 months' time, and they say that the recruiting will probably happen, or the ecosystem says that recruiting will happen based on certification, then what happens to all the discussion that we had in the last 1 hour or so? Fine, in terms of in the context of the new education policy. Kanyapan, do you want to take it? And then I'll probably get Selvam and Srinivasan to respond to that.
Can you say it again? I'm sorry, I didn't capture that.
No, the question from Ranga is, should the government regulate education so tightly in terms of how we assess, how we fund, how we award, what processes need to be done, and come up with some kind of a degree or a certificate after so many years, and they seem to be micromanaging everything. Yeah. Tomorrow, anybody can get an online input by looking at YouTube, reading from edX, get a Coursera certification, or Google wants to introduce certifications, which can potentially be the alternative choice in the marketplace. How will things change if we were to go down that path?
Yeah, I don't think the government has to mandate, because our own experience, most of our skill development, we actually partnered with TVS, CVAT, and now CPAT, or TVS training schools, because the industries need certain skill sets, which today it's not that much readily available in in the regulated type of system. They say, even to take people for 3 months for a industrial training or a project, they still say they cannot come there because, they have to meet certain amount of, the attendance, etc., etc. So it is too much regulated system. It doesn't give the flexibility for the institution and the industries to work together to develop the talent. So I don't think they should regulate, obviously.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, maybe Selvam, Srinivasan,
Yeah.
Dr. Jain?
Yeah, you mentioned about Google going to start a program. So definitely it's going to be a mega hit. But as I said, our Indians are leading the world. Sundar Pichai, Satya, they didn't study an online course. They're all physical classrooms. These are all temporary arrangements. We need blended system, like online and physical. Our old concept of Guru Shishya will work out. That's a holistic development. Still, I argue for physical classroom. Maybe you can have 20 or 30% blended, but we need physical classroom. So everyone is talking about US education system. You know about what you call Harvard, Stanford, and all. Still, they have B-grade, lower quality institutions in US, not known to outsiders. So you can, I think 2-3 years back, around 30 or 40 Andhra students were stuck in US because of US visa issue. All these kind of universities give visa, student visa, and they go and start business. They were arrested in US. So for that kind of universities, we need some system in India. We should not do like that. Definitely we need a system. But as Mr. Kanya said, it should not be too tightened, but we need a system. That's my point.
Yeah. I agree with Mr. Selvam that MOOCs should be a part of it. And now itself, I think in Madras University, about 20% of the program is MOOC courses. But I'll tell you my own personal experience. This was about 4 or 5 years back. And the government of Tamil Nadu has given some money to work on curriculum development. We had a professor from Purdue. This was pertaining to mathematics, I can tell you. Probably it may work to some other areas. The Purdue University professor, and there was one professor, Kannan, from probably the very famous professor from Central University, Hyderabad. We had a discussion for a pretty long time. If you take mathematics, the chalk and talk is the best policy there, rather than going in for an online courses, because this will help the logical thinking when I start putting things on the board. So I am not disagreeing that MOOC and online should be thrown away. It can be a part of it, but there are certain programs where logical thinking should be exposed to, teachers, students should be exposed to in subjects like mathematics, where direct interaction is necessary. So it should be in a blended form. That's my humble feeling.
So maybe just to extend that question, if Dr. Jain wants to come in on some other question, I think what Ranga is also asking is, should the government play such a strangulating role that they seem to be defining everything from the what and the how? I read an article in Business World on the new education policy a few weeks back when someone said, hey, look, why should education alone be in this country a not-for-profit activity? Fine, and why cannot it be a for-profit activity? Because traditionally we've been talking about roti, kapada and makan as the 3 key needs of an individual, and then perhaps comes education. Fine, first comes food, then comes shelter, then probably comes health and draping yourself, and then, but none of these sectors are not for profit. Why should education alone be not for profit? Fine, so the government seems to be influencing a number of characteristics around education which they have not influenced. Why shouldn't people manufacturing food be not for profit? Why shouldn't people running healthcare institution not be not for profit? Why shouldn't textile companies be not for profit, as one example? Second, as someone mentioned about the affiliating system of education and the government controlling millions of people through the affiliating network. Fine. I remember, I think it is probably the Chancellor G. Vishwanathan. I'm recalling him the second time on this webinar. I remember sitting through one of his sessions at an external event where he said there are only 3 countries in the world which actually has this affiliating system of education: Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. I think we really need to seriously think is if we need to probably keep company with such countries with the kind of system that we have. And I do believe that people are quite thrilled when they said that the affiliating system of education would eventually get abolished over a period of time. I think they've given some horizon before that could potentially get abolished. So maybe we'll move to the next question. Maybe this is for Dr. Jain. Is NEP an inclusive education policy? Fine. We keep talking about inclusion in a big way. I think Dr. Jain, Dr. Jain, are you able to hear me? Or maybe one of you can kick off your response to that question. I think when people talk about inclusion, Sir, Dr. Jain, are you able to hear me? Okay. Maybe one of you can take it, Dr. Srinivasan Silvam. Is NEP an inclusive program? I think some of you alluded to it. By inclusion, it's just not gender inclusivity, or it's not people with disabilities. I think inclusion is a much broader topic, right? Do we include every aspect of discussing in society? And Selvam, you mentioned this a little while back. Are we being inclusive from a rural-urban divide? Are we being inclusive from a digital divide standpoint? Fine, online is all good to talk, but how many devices even reach the hinterland? The last mile connectivity is not there even in terms of broadband. Many of the villages in the country, so on and so forth. Do you want to take it? Does it address the issue of inclusivity?
As you said, the bandwidth is a big issue. For example, we want to conduct. Is audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, we want to conduct online entrance exam. Every year, around 2 lakh students apply for B8 entrance exam. This year, we plan for. In fact, we discussed with the US company also, but because of bandwidth, we could not go. So still, we have bandwidth problems in India. So access is one more issue. As I said, one more point you mentioned, non-profit. Very, very important topic on today's thing. Because of this foreign universities, I'm not assured about this new education policy in subject, but as on existing policy, if a foreign university wants to start a campus in India, they had a point, whatever they invest, they should not take back to the country. So they treat it a business. So that's what no foreign university landed in India. That's my point. I don't know about this new policy, what they are going to mention.
No, I think you're right. I think we need to look at inclusion at various levels. Fine, even bringing in the best of the educational institutions globally to operate in India. And the absence of a repatriation clause, we are not in a position to attract some of the best institutions into the country. Dr. Jain, would you want to add to it? Because I think inclusion starts at the school level. Are we in a position to, does the new education policy, does it focus enough on inclusion, all forms of inclusion in society?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Inclusive education, a separate section has been given. And for others, the CBSE is already focusing on inclusive education. So based on that, the NEP 2020 is also covering inclusive education, and enough emphasis has been given in NEP 2020 for inclusive education, sir.
But what are the challenges that you have seen when it comes to inclusion? Let me just take two examples, right? One is RTE, the Right to Education Act, when it was formed. Even implementation of RTE was a challenge, which is one form of inclusion. Second, people with disabilities. Sometimes we are all very happy when people with disabilities study in exclusive institutions. But at the end of the day, once they complete education in those exclusive institutions, they come and then live in the society with all of us. Find slow learners versus fast learners, so on and so forth. So, shouldn't we create an institution which has all segments of people studying together? Because when they graduate or when they come out of the school or college, that's how they're going to probably live in the society rather than box them in exclusive institutions, whatever disability that they have. What is your take on that? What are the challenges of creating that kind of an inclusive system, and what should all of us do, not just the government, to make this a reality?
I agree with you. There seems to be negligence on the part of the parents also to educate their children about the importance of inclusive education. And we have read in newspapers the different stories about how the RT children are being treated differently in schools by the same teachers. And when the teachers and the management is treating the children in such a way, then how do you expect the other children to treat them at par with them? So therefore, it is duty of the principal and the teachers and the management to treat the RT children at par with the other children. That is number one. Number two, as far as the disability children is concerned, I fully agree with your point. And as a principal, and even as a teacher when I was teaching, because I started my career in the year 1985 till 2000, I was a teacher, and then only from 2000 I became the principal, and 18 years principal. So then I took VRS. So during the journey of as a teacher, I could see some sort of an aversion from the children towards the disability children. Even if they have a little hearing problem, they used to make a fun of them. And the stammering children, they used to make fun of them. So, in my personal opinion, we need to bring a system where credit should be given for the normal people when they're appreciating the disability people and RT people. So we need to think about these kind of methods in the school level itself, because definitely even in the NEP 2020, not 100 marks is going to be for the examination. Definitely they will give minimum 20 to 30 marks as internal marks. So we need to define certain parameters, certain area to give weightage for the children towards the attitude towards this kind of a children. That is what, as a educationist, my opinion is.
Now that's a very interesting point, sir. I think that's very well taken. Fine, unless educational institutions start defining the parameters in terms of what could create a well-rounded, holistic individual, unless we take into consideration some of these aspects for award of internal marks, it just cannot be the traditional parameters that we have used. There is one question, Kanyappan, maybe you may want to take it, or maybe even Selvam or Srinivasan, you could probably come in. This industry institute interaction, I think we've been talking about this for decades. I know that the national education policy is talking about bringing about internship even at school level. Fine, I know that's going to bring about a very different challenge when industry has had challenges in terms of giving internship even at a college level. And I can tell you, representing the IT industry, which goes and makes 20,000 offers in campuses in a given year, fine, we have struggled and we have been very challenged with internship. There is one of the attendees, Kanchana Bhaskaran, who has asked us question whether industries can share challenges and problems that they have, make it available on some kind of an open platform, and students can apply their mind and apply whatever they learn to address some of these problems. I know it's happening in a small way, but I would like you to take it, and maybe after that, maybe Dr. Srinivasan as well, given that he was also the Dean and Director of the university.
Yeah, Tom, I think, as you said, it is happening in a small way. And, some years ago, I brought the global head of our engineering, the CTO of WAPCO Global, to India, and then took him to very many universities to see if we can start some global projects in India. At the time he said, we are still not ready to take a global project here, but you start with student projects first. And then you take up some local projects, then So that is the path we are also taking. There are cases we have actually been partnering with some of the universities, some of the colleges, and then solving many of our problems through the student internship programs. The challenge we have with the government institutions are they have some regulatory issues. They are not able to release people for 6 months, etc. But then where there is a private institutions where the deemed universities type of arrangements, such feasibilities are there. We are partnering. I'm sure. I think many companies can do that. Maybe doing it. It is possible. But I believe one another dimension of this institution partnership. I believe most of the students, even from the rural areas or from institutions which are not of the high standing, if those students, when you take them and then put them on a training program for about 2 years, invariably at the end of 2 years, you realize they're as good as any other people. And they are able to work on projects, even for global projects. That intervention, we need to find a way to give it to these people. And the industry should pay them the decent money so that, they self-sustain. That is the dimension we need to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Srinivasan, you want to add to it?
Yeah, I think I can share my experience with you regarding this. As you know, that I was a part of the statistics department at Madras University. We had two programs. One is MSc in statistics, the other one is MSc in actuarial science. The actuarial science, as you know, is closely related to the insurance industry. So we had students, we had a program tailor-made in such a way that the students can write the society exams and probably they can become actuaries. And it helped a lot of students to become full-fledged actuaries also. But the one thing that surprised me, I think we are in probably the 20th year of running this program. Hardly any such programs are there in India. Probably 4 or 5 institutions are there. But the insurance industry is not coming forward to take students for internship as expected due to reason best known to them. Probably the reason they say that they don't want to reveal the data. That is the reason that they are trying to put across. They say that the data is something which is confidential. We don't want to part with the data, so we don't want to take internship. See, somewhere, I think there should be some way out. Like you talk about statistics. Statistics is the backbone of data sciences. So if you want people from statistics, obviously the software industry should help them. So the question here is, I'm not saying you should part with your data which is confidential in nature, but there should be some way where the industry should come forward and give a chance to the students to expose them to the critical thinking and analyzing whether it is a data in the industry, insurance industry, or any other industry. So I think the gap is still there between the educational institution and the industry, which needs to be bridged. And internships will help, but it is not going to the extent which we want. That's what I could observe.
No, I cannot agree more. Clearly, the industry needs to do more. And we are seeing some beginnings happening there. Selvam, you wanted to pitch in?
Yeah, I agree. Always we are talking about this gap. In CA also we are discussing about this. So main thing is institution should act like a troubleshooter. If industry has any problem, institution should be able to solve that. For example, in VIT, some core companies have a lab itself. They invest and they set up the lab in the institution. Where the problem is given to the research scholars, maybe other companies can also use that lab. That kind of facility we should create. We are talking about internship. So in this pandemic situation, maybe some IT company, they started online internship also. So first they give the internship offer. If they work well, they take it as a placement. They take it as a placement offer also. So internship is main thing is faculty should go for internship first. They should update the knowledge. We are talking about students first, because faculty who are teaching the student, they don't know about what's happening in the factories. But they should update the knowledge. If we want to send our faculty, there is a shortage of faculty. We cannot send 2 or 3 months to the industry. So again, coming back, teachers are most important. As my thing, teachers should be updated first as internship.
Cannot agree more. I remember we kicked it off at least at Cognizant a few years back, where we said whenever we run training programs for our students, if it's a batch of 20, we should allocate 2 seats for the faculty. Let 18 of them be from the company. And a couple of seats, and these are 1-day programs and 2-day programs, so that they don't get out of their campus for too long. I know there are a couple of other questions. Maybe I'll take one last question. I know there's one question, a very interesting question from Ranga, on rather than the government driving the agenda, shouldn't the industry and education sector set the agenda jointly? And then see where the government needs to play a role, if any. As we said, I think this is happening in some measures. You're seeing deemed to be universities, state-run private universities, autonomous institutions. They do have some latitude to define what they need to do. While in public-funded institutions, we still do probably have a bit of a challenge. Does anybody want to address that question?
Yeah, I agree. So soon this university, state, private will disappear. It's going to be only university. All university will be over. There will be no central, no state, no team. All is going to be university. So as you said, this policy implementation is a big problem. India's different culture, different states. There are state policies, there are central policy. All politics will happen. Implementation is a big problem. Maybe it will take 10 to 20 years also. Maybe after 20 years, if 100% implemented, like bodies like MCCI, CA is there, FICCI is there, NASCOM is there, maybe this can sit together and they can take over. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's terrific, Selvam. I cannot agree more. I would perhaps even go one step further and then say, forget about the classification of institutions, even distance learning, correspondence education, online degree, MOOC programs, certificate programs, maybe all these will converge and it will be like a set of Lego blocks. You piece them together. It will perhaps just be a Lego degree. And the NEP also says that there's going to be no distinction between technical university, liberal arts university, so on and so forth. So people can assemble squares and circles and rectangles and octagons and then create their own version of what the market actually needs. I do see I have exhausted most of the questions that I think that actually came on the Q&A chart. But let me take this opportunity to ask one question to Dr. Ajit Jain, which didn't come about, but I think this is a very important question to address and in the context of school education. Sir, suddenly we have seen the balance of equation move more towards private institutions rather than public institutions. As you know, today in India, more than 50% of institutions are private and less than 50 is government. So we seem to have swung from one end of the extreme. And when I looked at one data point, which I think got published in one of the newspapers earlier this week, which is called the District Information System data point, the DICE data point.
DICE, yeah.
So they said that in 2018, the public elementary schools saw a dip of 2.38 crore students and 2.11 crore students actually moved to the private education system. Now, what does this mean? And what do you think are going to be the ramifications of this kind of a shift? And the reason why I'm asking is the national education policy seems to have completely stayed away from talking extensively about the private schools, and there seems to be a lot of focus on the public schools. So given that that shift has happened and the education policy is in relative terms a little silent on this, how would you react to this shift?
It's a very, very valid point. If you look at the statistics, I think the Honorable Minister for Education, he himself has agreed and said in the floor of the Assembly that in the last 3 years, there has been a continuous reduction in the intake of the strength of the private from government schools. On the other hand, there is a sharp increase in the intake from the private schools. Now, yesterday, I was talking to school owner who came to my consultancy for some discussion, and he was also telling that for this academic year there seems to be some sort of exodus from matriculation schools to CBSE schools. When Aranganayagam was the education minister, when he announced a 2% reservation for CBSE schools in colleges, in all the colleges, then there was an exodus of students to 11th and 12th from CBSE to state government. And also when Anna University also announced some criteria about state board and CBSE and given upper hand for the CBSE children, this state board children, there was an exodus from CBSE to state board. Now, after the introduction of NTA, National Testing Agency, which is conducting all the entrance examinations for professional colleges, whether it is engineering or it is going to be a medical. And also the NEP 2020 is again given a prominent role for NTA to conduct all sorts of examination, and also they are planning to bring a common examination for all the arts and science colleges. So the mindset of the people is NTA is a central government body, so it will focus only based on the CBSE syllabus or ICSE syllabus. It is the myth among the parents that CBSE and ICSE syllabus are superior than the state government. So that is why there seems to be the number of children admitted in the government schools are coming down. As you said, they only said hereafter no school can use the word public. Only the government schools will be named after public schools, as in the case of America, United States. But in my opinion, just changing the name is not going to solve the problem. So either they have to bring within 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers where there is a government school. They should not give permission to start CBSE schools. Something like that we need to bring in. Then only the intake in the government schools will go. And they also, as a matter of fact, I was in the committee of Government of Tamil Nadu for the examination reformation last 2 years back. When I saw the new syllabus for 11th and 12th, it is actually at par with NCERT and at par with CBSE. There is no doubt. But unfortunately, for political reasons, people started criticizing the Samachir Kalvi. But in my opinion, the Samachir Kalvi syllabus is at par with the CBSE and ICSE. Therefore, what we need to do is the government should bring certain regulations controlling the mushrooming of private schools. Then only, and also at the same time, they need to give infrastructure to the government schools and give proper training to the because now in CBSE, when you are writing, when you are filling a form every year, VIAS is online assessment of the information system of schools. Against every teacher, then you can give how many hours of training program the particular teacher underwent during 1 year. But this kind of information, whether it is being taken by the state government for their own teachers, I have my own doubt. Therefore, my point here is the government should come forward to improve the quality of teaching and the teachers' quality. Then only people have faith in government schools, then the children will go to government schools.
Yeah, I cannot agree more, sir. I think accountability is clearly a very important topic.
Yes.
Governance and accountability are very, very important topics, especially when it comes to...
Now, even during this lockdown, there are a lot of memes have come that private school teachers without salary, they're working morning to evening on online classes, but the government teachers sitting at home doing nothing, they're getting full salary.
No, we would want everybody to get salary, sir. at the end of the day, I think we are at the top of the hour. We started about 5 minutes late, and we are at 12:07. Let me take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining in. I know that there are some very interesting questions that are coming up at a very late hour. I know there's somebody who was asked, hey, is there a possibility for dentists, people who are professionally qualified to also to start teaching in schools? Is there a provision for it? How can we probably go about doing it, so on and so forth? Unfortunately, for want of time, we're not in a position to take it, but then we'll be very happy to circulate some of these questions, consolidate them, and take it to the panelists. The reason why I asked this public-private debate is government does have a role in education, fine, and if more and more private institutions come about only in metros and in places where it is attractive for them, we don't want the rural hinterland to be left behind. Fine, and I think Selvam did touch upon this even early on, and I was part of one other conversation where someone said, hey, look, this consolidation and cluster of institutions being brought together, you don't want a situation where you don't have primary schools or secondary schools within 1 or 2 kilometer radius of where the kids are studying. If in the consolidation, if people will have to cover about 10 kilometers distance, then it defeats the very purpose of education in the country. So I think we have covered much ground. The one question, which I think was the first question from Ranga, which we haven't answered in this webinar, is I think it's a topic for another day. Look at what are the challenges that we are going to probably look at when it comes to implementation. In fact, one of the criticisms of the education policy is, hey, having spent 5 years, 6 years to curate this policy, why is it an action plan in terms of how we are going to implement this was not part of the plan? It still is a typical policy document, if you will. But I think we have clearly covered the why and the what. Maybe there is an opportunity for us to have a follow-on conversation on the challenges when it comes to the real implementation, on the ground implementation. Maybe Kishore and Ramanathan, this is food for thought for you, to look at the top 20 challenges when it comes to implementing this particular policy. And as many of you know, the Madras Chamber of Commerce does run a breakfast session. So in the current context, I think you need to bring your breakfast to the table, and then we will get someone to talk about the food for thought and cover that particular topic. Let me take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining in. But there is a very interesting poem that I came across during the lockdown period. And I want to just look at 2 lines from that particular poem, which is fascinating. And hearing all of you speak about your experiences and the insight that you brought to the table, I cannot but recollect this poem. I know it's not verbatim, but it is along these lines. It says that we are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. So each one of us, I think we have the latitude to make a difference and bring about a change in the teaching, learning process in India. And I'm sure that all of us in our individual capacity as well will try and then bring about this change. I know that there is a very senior person in the academic context who runs Pratham, a body today, and he's also very highly respected for having incubated many institutions. He said, we cannot really look at only designated qualified teachers to be teachers. Every one of us have a certain responsibility to teach and give back to society in whatever way or form we can. And even those with years of experience, I'm just looking at Kaniyappan because Kaniyappan and I, we had a conversation on this topic a few days back, where a bunch of us who are in the wrong side of 50s, we're all having a conversation in terms of how is it that we can give back to society once we formally step down, once we retire from our services, and see, is there a way by which we can contribute to education and learning in some way? I know many years back somebody told this to me. They pointed to what happens in Singapore and Canada and said, just as people cannot join the job without putting in 1 or 2 years of service in the military or in the defense in some of the countries, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Canada, or whether it's Israel, they said once somebody retires from active service, whether it's at 55 or 58 or 60, whatever is the retirement age in the respective organization, they should not be allowed to dip into their provident fund or gratuity unless they give back 1 year to education, because they've got so much from education. It's time for them to probably give back to education. So in some respect, I look at every one of us as potential teachers. On that note, many thanks for joining in. Thanks for your insights, and stay safe until we meet again. Thank you.
One minute before closing. Thank you so much from the MadrasChamber. Dr. Ramanathan has joined. He's not there to give a lot of thanks. Let me take pleasure in thanking all the panelists. Mr. Srinivasan, very interesting to note that he would like to be reborn as a statistician again. Probably if the same option is given to many of us, we may rethink about having the next birth. Thanks, Dr. Srinivasan, for the beautiful presentation. Mr. G.V. you mentioned about the grounded education need and things like that, and definitely yes, and you have a lot of hopes on our present education system when it comes from VIT. We definitely have to accept it. Mr. Prasad Jain, thank you so much for being with us. Especially the early education has always been a sort of a plus and minuses, and you brought it up very clearly, the gap between the NEP and the new education policy, right? The education and the NEP, a point of concern. And Mr. Kaniyappan, of course, our General Committee member, as well as from the industry side, because as Mr. Ramkumar said at the beginning, always in all this, much about the industry, institute connect, industry is always missing. So happy that the chamber could write that. I remember what Mr. Ramadurai, the Prime Minister's advisor, told when he launched our skill development initiative. He was mentioning that the industries cannot just stand away and keep complaining they are not getting employable graduates. They have to be part of the system. That came more and more often in the current discussion. Lot more people who have participated. Unfortunately, we couldn't give an all pass to all the WebEx registrants here. They had some issues, but we have also shared it with YouTube, and I understand more than are now totally on both the things. So thank you so much all the panelists. I cannot thank more. Ramkumar Ramurthy, what should I say? A past academician and probably a future academician also. So thank you so much. But for your efforts, this program wouldn't have shaped up well. And a special thanks to Mr. Kishore, the chairman of our Education Committee, and Professor Ramanathan, the co-chair of the Education Committee, and all the members of the Education Committee who had a lot of discussion on this as how to discussion forward. So thanks to all of them. Thanks to all the participants, Mr. Srivastava, GC members, and my whole team. In fact, we have a small memento. I just, unfortunately, we are presenting it virtually because on a Teachers' Day, we cannot go without recognizing the teachers, mostly here. And the memento is real. We sent to your places. But can we just have a look at the screen, Swarna? Madhu?
Yes, ma'am, 1 second.
Now present it virtually. Is it there?
Yes, ma'am, it's coming. 2 minutes, ma'am.
Please, we are already. So in the meantime, there are very clear takeaways, like what should be done more on the inclusivity aspect, what should be done more, because the teachers are the core. That came again and again. So Ramkumar gave one suggestion. Anybody to make it probably compulsory to go and take game for it. And we have a system, a pedagogic institutions to have a good system for teachers development. And of course, the blended education and the continuous research process. Thanks. These mementos, very, very helpful to all the participants, all the panelists particularly. The mementos will be reached to you. And thanks everyone once again for continuous wishes to all the teachers on special Teachers' Day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.